Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
Here's your host, Randy Tobler.
So I sit here today as a son. Forget about politics for a second. I've been in that courthouse with my father almost every single day. And not a single New Yorker, as they look at murders in the streets, women getting thrown in front of trains, kids getting shot in Times Square, the degradation of this city, not a single New Yorker believes that over $130,000 payment from 9 years ago, from 8 years ago, that the entire DA's office is lining that courtroom.
Well, there's Eric Trump on a very tumultuous day again yesterday as the judge will throw the trial to the jury today. Welcome into Wake Up Mid-Missouri. And, of course, that is the news as Verdict Watch will be on later today. Welcome into the program. I'm Randy Tobler. There's Stephanie Bell, who, of course, will be pontificating on this all day.
Good morning.
and producer Hannah. You're going to be ready. Going to be asking for your verdict.
It's too early for those big words.
And John Marsh, we're going to have to ask your opinion on this, too. I don't know.
Judgment Day looms for Donald Trump in New York, to quote CNN.
Judgment Day.
And Hannah, you're right. We've been learning new words as the trial has progressed and as different Trump trials have progressed. We talked about spoliation.
Oh, spoliation.
Then yesterday we talked about preservation. But we got a new word yesterday.
No.
Gloat.
Oh, that's right.
I'm thinking you kind of like that one, Hannah.
I mean, yeah, it's shorter and easier to understand.
So Tom Brady, what the defense said, if Tom Brady is the GOAT, then Michael Cohen is the gloat.
The greatest liar of all time.
That's
pretty good.
That's going to be the if it don't fit, you must quit line, I think, of the century, especially if it does end up a hung or an acquit jury.
It's really good. You have to admit it's really good. But basically, they said you can't convict someone based on Michael Cohen. Like, he's a liar. We know he's a liar. He lied before. He lied during this trial. You just can't convict someone on the words of him. That went for almost 4 hours in the morning. Then they took a break. Now, they got admonished by the judge.
Yes.
Halfway through, because they basically said you can't send him to prison over this, and you're really not allowed to talk about punishment. Apparently during your closing arguments. And so the jurors were instructed to basically strike that from the record.
So Mershon chewed the defense attorney out.
Yeah, said you knew better. You shouldn't have said go to prison.
At the same time, the judge overruled the defense's objection during the prosecution when the prosecution said he's guilty, as though it were fact, he's guilty of federal election crime offenses. I mean, from what this layperson is looking at this judge's behavior and thinking, this guy needs to be like, maybe he could be on the Supreme Court of Russia or something.
Yeah, we're gonna. I mean, and we're gonna see a little bit more from the judge this morning as he instructs the jury. And so we're gonna get a little bit more color around his feeling about the trial and where we think this might be headed. I would say, I mean, it was interesting. The prosecutors, I think, tried to deal with Michael Cohen in the best way they could. And they said, look, he's not the end all be all. He's just a tour guide of all this other physical evidence. He's just kind of putting the pieces together, and you don't really have to believe, because what are they going to do with him, right? And then I think the best argument they made against him was they're like, actually, yeah, I mean, he's not the best. They didn't really say he's not the best, but what they said was, we didn't pick him. Look, we didn't get to pick this guy. Trump picked this guy. That's how this guy ended up here. But I do think they need to explain more about, they could have picked other witnesses. We didn't hear from people like Weisselberg. We didn't hear from, other people that were supposedly involved in this scheme. He was their star witness, and they did make him the star witness. But they tried to kind of blame Trump for Michael Cohen.
Yeah, Trump is at fault for Cohen owning the NDA, all of the work process around that somehow. They tried to rehabilitate him, although they did, on the one hand, admit, well, he's not a saint. But after all, I mean, it was the most convoluted, at least the reporting on it was the most convoluted I've ever heard.
And can you imagine being a juror? Yeah. You've been off for a week. You've been eating ribs, celebrating with your family. You come back and you have I think the whole thing was 8 hours. I mean, there were breaks and stuff, but they basically
started at 8:30.
Yeah, the first argument was about 3.5 hours.
Then they closed at 7.
They took a break,
almost 12
and
hours.
they came back. Yeah, I mean that is a
And then
long.
they had Robert De Niro out on the street.
Oh, I got some great De Niro sound. They brought De Niro out. He's the guy that the Biden campaign struts
You talking
out.
to me?
Oh.
You talking to me?
Now, there's other news in state matters. Governor Parson has decided when a couple of opportunities to vote on amendments will happen, because, he does have some, I guess, jurisdiction over whether it's in the August or the November timeframe. We'll be talking about that. I saw a Border Patrol interview on 60 Minutes that I've got to get to. This guy, unbelievable, the incompetence in this administration. The Border Patrol chief for the first couple of years under Biden had some scathing things to say, most of which was he was ignored. And later on, we're going to be talking, in fact, early on at 6:35 with Michael Bekesha. He's from Judicial Watch. They do a lot of great work on just really getting the FOIA request and or filing lawsuits to really get down into the deep state, find out what's going on. And so he's got a couple of things cooking. And for those of you who, are interested in the great outdoors and in mid-Missouri, if you're not interested in the great outdoors, you don't have a pulse, right? It's a beautiful area. There's all kinds of opportunities to get out. The Missouri Department of Conservation, of course, helps maintain and preserve and nurture all of the lands that we enjoy, and provides a lot of resources for your own, edification of the land. I work closely with a couple of their wildlife biologists, and a guy who I've known before as a deer biologist, and he's now the new director of the department, will be joining us a little bit later at 7:10. Jason Sumners is his name, so we'll be talking with him as well.
A mid-Missourian?
A mid-Missourian, indeed. And it'll be a lot of fun to learn about that.
He's a mid-Missourian, and I think, the other thing that you mentioned, the size of the department, it's a huge department, obviously. It employs, they have impact on all 114 counties.
Dedicated tax?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do, which is somewhat controversial at times. But they also are involved, Randy and Stephanie, in the Boone County Nature School. And that is a huge, and people sometimes think it's just Columbia, but it's not. It's all 6 school districts, and technically, if other school districts in the state would like to go there, they'll be able to, but they're building that near Three Creeks, so I'll be curious to hear the latest on that. I was down there when they did
And the CPS superintendent recently used that nature school as a little cudgel in arguing against the legislation to put a charter school in Boone County. A little bit of let's say a misrepresentation of the truth there. So I hope you'll stay with us just as much as you can all morning here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. The number's 573-874-9390. And again, a reminder, we already have all kind of sign-ups and reservations for the big Lakeside event center the debate watch we're going to be doing June 27th, right?
Yeah, y'all didn't break our registration page yesterday, but I think you came close.
Gave it a shot, didn't they?
Yeah.
We warned you guys that spots were going to fill up fast, and lo and behold, they were rushing in yesterday, so I'm really excited to hang out with you guys.
And you guys are on it. I know we've got some stuff on Facebook. I know not everyone's on the social media. You have our text line, so if you text us and say Debate Watch, we will text you the link to get signed up. We've got that handy here, but we're very excited. It's our first big Debate Watch event. We're gonna. We've also we've got several local candidates already signed up. I think we've got Jesus Osete, Sam Turner, Bryce Beal. I think Boone County Republicans are going to be there. So if you haven't had a chance to get to know some of these people, and those are rolling in, we'll keep those posted so you know who's going to be there.
I hope Jesus brings some of his legendary yard signs.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot look at those the same way ever since. So, of course, his name is Jesus. You've all seen the little blue and white signs that just say Jesus. Mm-hmm. And, people will put them in their yard or up and down the highway.
Jesus saves and other variations.
And he needs to just reprint those, although they need the paid for by disclosure to be clear. But
no truth to the rumor that the QAnon shaman will be in attendance, right?
Right.
And I think as a warm-up act that night at Lakeside, just after the doors open, Northwest will be performing.
Officially uninvited.
We played a little bit of that yesterday. I still can't get that out of my mind.
It's awful. So, I guess Kim Kardashian walks in and takes away someone's dreams of being little Simba because she wants her daughter, who does not have the chops to play this role, to take over it.
I sent Stephanie a video yesterday, and it was comparing Northwest's vocals to one of the kids that was a finalist for the role.
It's awful.
It was his audition tape, and it's just night and day difference.
It's super tough as a parent because you think your kid walks on water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I get it. We all do, and it's hard to say, to get an on it, But I think you would. I think every parent. I mean, I think my biggest hope for them is that they at least get a fair shake. That there's no favoritism. And so, if she wanted her to play the role, then she should have just gone through the process like everybody else. And how cool would that have been if they would have been kind of undercover or in disguise, and then she ends up winning it and then being like, look at, she got it out of merit. It feels really yucky.
The fireworks continue up at Sturgeon after the mayor resigned on Saturday. Packed, and the venue was moved for the council meeting there last night. A little update on that, Brian?
Well, the update really is that we'll hear something in about 48 hours. Mitch Kaminsky was live last night on Channel 17. And he reported, you're correct, that it did get moved to the recreation center. Hard to tell from the crowd, from the video. I mean, people literally were lined up out the door, but it's the biggest crowd you're ever going to see at a Sturgeon Board of Aldermen meeting. They did play a couple of sound bites. One woman made some rather serious allegations, I thought, against the officer since she worked with him at Moberly. Without documentation, I'm not going to go with that. But there was a soundbite from a gentleman in the crowd, and he flat out told the board that, you either get rid of him or we will vote you all out, is what the gentleman basically, I'm paraphrasing, but what he said. But, it looked like it was, they can't really say too much right now. It's just it's a pretty tough situation, very emotional.
The dog's owners filed a federal constitutional lawsuit.
Yeah,
Justice for Teddy. Come on.
And they are
a federal lawsuit.
There are calls, by the way, coming into the Boone County Sheriff's Office thinking it's the Boone County Sheriff's Office that shot the dog, but they did not. It is a Sturgeon officer. But yeah, people, a lot of these, it's what I always worry about when you get the national press involved in stuff like this. It's a Sturgeon officer. It is a Sturgeon case.
Well, TMZ reported on it over the weekend.
Really?
One of our coworkers in the building sent me the link, so
at some
it's
point
out there.
We need to talk with Matt Nichols or someone from the police organization, maybe someone from Sheriff Carey's office, about what kind of training not canine officers, but I mean, I'm sure they're specialized officers, but what does every officer have as part of their training in terms of managing these situations? I'm sure there's policies and
kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave.
Robert De Niro.
I just, why? Why? Can we get over like the celebrities telling us what they think about politics? These people should not be allowed to tell us much of anything.
Yeah, the campaign brings him out, and they have a couple of the first responders from J6 behind him, a police officer and another one there. An odd setting.
They are floundering, and I thought this headline was really interesting. Apparently, Biden and Harris will travel to Philadelphia today to launch a new coalition group, a new one, all right? What's this new coalition having to do with? It's to launch support among black voters. And I'm thinking, I didn't know the Democrats needed to launch a new coalition to get black voter support, because if you recall, just a couple of years ago, Biden was having to apologize. Remember what he said? He said, if you ain't black if you're voting for Trump,
Right.
if you're
You didn't vote for
considering Trump.
me, you ain't black.
And now he's having to launch a coalition to try to shore up this black vote. And you've seen it. I mean, seen all like at these new Trump rally or at these recent Trump rallies, the support that Trump has amongst African Americans, amongst black voters, amongst people of all colors. And I think the Biden camp is getting really scared. I don't think rolling out Robert De Niro is helping. And I don't think like having to launch a coalition for somebody that apparently last year you thought, or, last cycle you thought was in the bag for you, is a good look for their campaign.
This was a campaign spokesman who came in front of the mic first, and this was a Biden campaign event outside the Trump rally. I mean, nothing for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden this.
Ridiculous. All right. Well, and we are getting some new polling. Decision Desk HQ, The Hill came out, and they're talking about this new modeling. They're saying it gives Trump a 58% chance of winning the presidency, but it also shows that the GOP is favored to win in both the Senate, a 79% chance of winning the Senate, 64% chance holding the majority in the House. Now, those numbers seem really rosy compared to like the Republicans that I've been talking to. And I'm wondering, because I feel like I kind of got duped the last time into thinking like red wave. And then, and so I worry a little bit that we're going to get this narrative of like, oh, it's going to be this big red wave. Then people stay at home. They don't think either vote's needed or whatever. And then we get the red trickle.
So this is a liberal polling psyops reverse psychology operation? Lull us into complacency?
I worry a little bit about that.
Very interesting theory.
I've got my tinfoil hat on today. We are also getting ready. But so let's talk a little bit about what that means, because I do think, while we're talking a lot about the presidency, we got to talk about Congress, because one thing we've talked to Dr. Hedlund from the Show Me Institute about, that people are very excited. If we get Trump, we're going to, fix inflation. We're going to fix the border. We also have those Trump-era tax cuts that are set to sunset, and they will have to be renewed. And that's one thing that, Republicans are already talking about. If we can, get a win in Congress, that's something that they're looking at doing. And that, think about losing those tax cuts on top of inflation. It would just be awful.
It would end at the end of 25, right?
Yeah, it's coming up quick.
And that would being a conscience that is so needed there. And there's a couple of actions that are going on we wanted to bring you in on. We bring in Michael now. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Doing great. Thanks for being with us. We are going to, by the way, before things are over, ask you, if you want to make a prediction on the Trump, trial, just to give you a little fair warning, okay? Because that's sort of, since that's on everyone's mind this morning. But you guys are active in the whole issue of this reparations deal, and you've taken a big action here, just recently announced. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Evanston, Illinois, northern suburb of Chicago, first city or state in the country to, start giving out reparations to individuals. In Evanston, they are just about to start giving money out to direct descendants of ancestors who lived in Evanston between 1919 and 1969. And there are essentially two criteria. One is that you're an ancestor of somebody that lived in Evanston at some point between 1919 and 1969. And two, that you identify as Black and that your ancestors identified as Black. And that is it. And if you can prove those two things, the city will give you $25,000.
$25,000? How do you prove those things? Is it like a form? You just fill it out and then they cut you a check?
Pretty much. I mean, when it comes to race, you just have to identify. So that's just filling out a form. It asks, are you Black or African American? And you check yes or no. And then to prove that your ancestor lived there, it could be a yearbook, a phone book, a utility bill, and to prove a high school graduation announcement, and to prove that, you are the direct descendant. So you are the grandchild, great-grandchild, or child of that person, a birth announcement, a birth certificate, maybe a communion announcement, all sorts of things that, aren't all that serious can allow you to get a check for $25,000.
So why, I'm interested in this qualification. So slavery was over by the time 1919 rolled around. Why these brackets? Defendants, either you had a relative there or you lived there between 1919 or 1969. Why these brackets?
So Evanston did a study, and what it showed was, or at least what Evanston thinks it showed, is that there was housing discrimination that was taking place in Evanston during that 50-year time period. What the report does not show is that the city of Evanston was engaging in discrimination. It shows redlining, which was done by real estate agents or by the banks. The Federal Housing Administration was a big proponent of redlining, but there was no evidence that the city itself discriminated against these individuals. But the idea was, well, if you were Black and you lived in Evanston during that time period, of course you were discriminated against, and so therefore you're eligible, or your descendants are eligible for this money. The other very big piece of this that is concerning is these individuals don't have to show that any discrimination took place against them or against their ancestors. So it's not a check a box if you're Black, check a box if you lived in Evanston during that time period, and write 4 sentences showing that you were discriminating.
Wow. What if I moved away? Can I move back and then check the box and get my 25? Let's talk about your lawsuit. So you hear all these facts.
Stephanie, I have to say that if you are a descendant, so if your great-grandparents lived in Evanston and you were Black, even though you live in Missouri, you'd still be entitled to that $25,000.
Wow. So you hear this program, you read the facts, and you think, that doesn't seem right. So it's actually a class action. So talk about who you're suing on behalf of and kind of what the makeup of the lawsuit is.
Yeah, so we filed a class action lawsuit last year. This is the first class action I've ever brought since we graduated law school. We represent 6 individuals, but for the fact that they identify as white and their ancestors identified as white, they would be eligible for the $25,000. So all of them have either parents, and most likely parents and grandparents, that lived in Evanston between 1919 and 1969. And, they would be eligible to apply for the program to receive the money, but for the color of their skin. So we represent 6 individuals that fit this criteria. And, we are also seeking, relief for everybody that would fit that criteria. So anybody that would be eligible for this money, but for their race.
That's Michael Bekesha with Judicial Watch. Their motto is because no one is above the law, and we're glad for their watchdoggedness. He joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri this morning.
Michael, what about the debate that we've heard in other jurisdictions and we're not hearing out of Evansville, and that's Native American tribes and their search for, get a little money out of the deal? Have we heard anything like that in this suit?
Right now in Evanston, Illinois, it's only Black or African American descendants. What we have also seen, although it's not part of the lawsuit, but I imagine it will come up in court at some point, is, redlining didn't just affect and housing discrimination to the extent it existed and to the extent it was being done by banks and the realtors and collusion of private individuals, was also happening against the Irish, against Jewish Americans, against Native Americans, against Koreans. And so we've, I also heard from one woman that talked about how women weren't able to get mortgages on their own during that time period. And so, Evanston has really picked one small group of people and is using race as a proxy for discrimination. And, our Constitution just doesn't allow that.
Yeah, I wonder if Rachel Dolezal ever lived in Chicago. She claims about being trans black, so maybe she could. You said all that you have to do is claim to have lived there or a relative there, and you identify as black. That makes it even more interesting.
It does. It, from a legal perspective, makes it even more complicated and even harder for the city to prove that they're doing this for legitimate reasons.
Now, racial discrimination is also at the heart of this lawsuit that you guys are involved in up in Minneapolis. Can you talk to us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Minneapolis Public Schools, they had a strike, and to get out of the strike, there were some concessions that the city had to give to the teachers, and one of them was to change the way in which they conducted layoffs. So instead of laying off the last teacher hired, so last teacher in, first teacher out, that's the, what I would say is bad policy, but basically the standard across the country. Minneapolis changed that to make it be last teacher in is first teacher out, unless you're black, and then you skip over that individual and you find the white teacher and you lay the white teacher off. So pure racial discrimination once again. And so Judicial Watch is representing a Minneapolis taxpayer that doesn't want her tax money being spent to engage in this type of discrimination. And so we have sued. We won at the Minnesota Court of Appeals. The Minnesota Court of Appeals said our case could move forward. But Minneapolis Public Schools, along with roughly 7 public employee unions, asked the Minnesota Supreme Court to hear the case because they're trying to keep this out of the courts. And so we will be arguing the case in the Minnesota Supreme Court probably early fall after the summer recess.
Now, that court is pretty left-leaning, aren't they, Michael? The Supreme Court?
I believe it is. However, my understanding of the Minnesota Supreme Court, like most Supreme Courts around the country, is they try to do the right thing. And we are confident that when they see this blatant racial discrimination, it will do the right thing. Our case before it is about who is able to sue over it. And we believe the Minnesota Supreme Court will say that a taxpayer who doesn't want their tax money spent for racial purposes would be the right party to sue and to challenge its law.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that you may think that the justices and judges always don't that they always do the right thing and don't bring their bias into it. But I guess Judge Juan Marchand would be the prime example of that, right? After all, he's not biased. He always does the right thing. You're supposed to laugh there, Michael.
It's pretty remarkable what's going on in New York.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, I find it interesting to hear attorneys' thoughts. I think our audience would find it interesting because there seems to be certainly on the right side of the spectrum, no doubt that there's been a lot of, at least questionable moves by this judge and, bias in some of his actions and statements. What are your thoughts as as this it's going to go to the jury today after instructions?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, and I think both attorneys on the right as well as the left, if they're being honest, would say that the prosecution is going to have a difficult time getting a guilty verdict because the prosecution had to show that there was an underlying crime, and we still don't know what that underlying crime was.
Yeah.
And I saw on MSNBC and CNN the other day, there were a few attorneys on that kind of hinted at it, but didn't give it much credence. But I think everybody realizes that there's a major flaw in the case, and I guess we have to wait to see what the jury does, but, where's the underlying crime?
Well, Michael Bekesha, we thank you. Michael is a senior attorney with Judicial Watch, and we might say a graduate of the University of Missouri Law School, like our own Stephanie Bell.
My classmate.
There you go. All right. Hey, thanks, Michael. We'll be keeping an eye on things. Look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks so much.
All right. There he is. This kind of stuff is hard to imagine, this reverse discrimination that has become just standard operating procedure, whether it's, governments, municipal governments, the former Border Patrol chief, Raul Ortiz,
Aghast.
Wow. Aghast. Along with spoliation. That's another word that we need to use. Well, I don't know. Somehow I got onto this. Do you ever get where you find you getting emails because somewhere along the line you signed up for a daily newsletter or reminder? I keep getting these emails from Word of the Day.
I love Word of the Day.
I love
Do you
Word of
know
the Day.
how many unread Gmail?
Oh, you too?
76,620.
You too. I thought I was the only one that did that.
So do I sign up for
Yeah.
newsletters?
The other day,
I got
Yes.
65,000 on my Yahoo.
the other day was crepitation, which is a great one. If you get air under the skin, like with subcutaneous emphysema, you go crackles. It's called crepitation. Very good word.
I thought that's what's happening on my under eyes.
Doctors sometimes
Happy breakfast, folks.
Doctors confuse crepitation with crepitus. Crepitus is like when you have crackling at a joint. You know, when the joint goes, that's crepitus. Okay, at any rate, all right.
About that.
I have that, I think.
Enough of that diversion. Well, I think I have it in my neck. You ever have it when your neck, you twist your neck and go, but
That's how my ankle is.
That's when you need to call Dr. Ashley Emmel.
There you go.
Right.
So anyway, Raul Ortiz, he retired last year, but he said this to the CBS News 60 Minutes reporter.
This 2-mile stretch, what about the other 200 miles?
In our interview, Ortiz criticized Governor Abbott for not cooperating with the Border Patrol and playing politics with immigration. But he also expressed frustration with President Biden.
I've never had one conversation with the president or the vice president for that matter. And so I was the chief of the Border Patrol. I commanded 21,000 people.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but okay, if you ask voters what is their top issue, it's probably the economy, right? In all the polls. Immigration is usually in the top 2 or 3. Even among independents and Democrats, it's up there. It's in the top 5 for sure. Especially when they were raging. Remember, there were caravans coming up, tens of thousands of people crossing the border. Democratic congressmen and saying that we've got to stop this.
Not even a phone call.
No conversation. Think about that. That's willful neglect of a major problem. That's why that alone is a reason this president needs to be given the hook. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing people love about Trump is that, if there's a problem, he's there. I mean, what we heard was he called Missouri Representative Ben Baker.
Yep.
And granted, he's not, POTUS right now, but we heard that when he was president, if there was an issue, he would fly there. If there was an emergency, he was on the ground. He was talking to the people that matter. He was comforting families. And I think he wants to be involved. And I think they've completely ignored that problem. Kamala's ignored it, even though she was what the borders are. And Biden is certainly ignoring it. It reminds me, I had a sister that taught, and she told me once, and I was just flabbergasted. She had been in a school for many years, and she said, I don't think I've ever seen the superintendent at this building. And I thought, you're the leader. How do you lead when you don't spend any time with your people?
Yeah,
it's embarrassing.
I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. So on the other thing, we don't have time now, but at 7:35, can you help me understand? The governor has
the morning discussion about word of the day, and so it seems it was probably well deserved on that one, but not an uncommon slip up that we hear from folks.
Well, as we're heading towards a hard break, the clock is ticking down, and that's when I am most likely to make one of my many mistakes. But you obviously have not made many, if any, mistakes in your career, because you are the newly appointed director of the Department of Conservation here in Missouri. One of the lauded departments and one of the highly sought-after departments in terms of employment throughout these United States. Congratulations on that, and welcome into Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you guys for having me. I certainly have made my fair share of mistakes. I guess it's how you learn from them and continue to move forward that is the measure of whether you're successful or not. But no, it's just truly humbling for the commission to have asked me to serve in this role, and not only protecting the fish, forest, and wildlife resources of the state, but also as we continue to find ways to connect citizens to nature.
When I saw the name Jason Sumners as the newly appointed director, I recalled that you were at my farm when we have a large area of deer management, sort of an informal co-op that one of your good buddies and employees, Ted Seiler, along with Jeff DeMann, good friends of mine in the wildlife, in the private lands area, helped organize. And I remember when you were deer biologist and I think in charge of the deer program in Missouri, you presented a really nice program there, and I've seen a couple of other presentations. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your love of wildlife, and some of your plans for the department as you lead it.
Yeah, those times with landowners and with staff have been certainly some of the most rewarding things I've got the opportunity to do. I'm a native Missourian. As you mentioned, working for the conservation department is something that's sought after by folks across the country just because of the model that we have here in Missouri. And so I grew up with humble roots. I'm from Lincoln, not Nebraska, Missouri. Went to high school with 32 kids, and my mom and dad were both factory workers. My mom sewed pants, and my dad made gun stocks, and wow. So that rural upbringing, I spent tons of time as a kid in the outdoors, and so many family memories, I think, is what early on planted the seed and the desire to work in the field of conservation.
Jason, talk to us about the health of the deer herd, and we also understand some permit costs are going up this year. Could you hit on those two topics?
Yeah, sure. My background is, as Randy highlighted, I grew up as a deer biologist within the agency, and 13 months into being in what I thought was my dream job as a deer biologist, we found chronic wasting disease, and certainly that was not a positive thing. But fortunately, our partnership with private landowners and with the hunting public, we've been able to at least slow the spread of that disease. I know it's alarming when we find 150 additional positives this year, but where we find the disease, it continues to be actually extremely low prevalence and pretty small distribution. Not been adjusted, and as everyone is well aware, inflation and the cost of goods and services, and us carrying out conservation work, like everything else, continues to increase. And so a couple of years ago, the commission directed us to look at ways to slowly, very slowly but incrementally increase the cost of permit prices. And so we did that last year on, pretty much across the board permits. And then just late last week, the commission moved forward to seek public comment on again, increasing the cost of permits primarily on non-residents.
Director Sumners, we appreciate you joining us live. I was in just south of Columbia back in the fall, between Columbia and Ashland. They call that area Three Creeks, as you know, and they just an incredible ceremony for the Boone County Nature School, and I know it was being built at the time. It's kind of hard to see from the highway. It was a little hard to find. What is the status, sir, of that project, and any time frame on when you expect that to open?
Yeah, so the Boone County Nature School is something that our outgoing director, Sarah Parker Pauley, was extremely passionate about. I mean, she's extremely passionate about trying to find ways to connect citizens, and so the Nature School is going to be a place where every fifth grader in the county gets an opportunity to go out and experience nature, which unfortunately, not all of them have that opportunity. And with the great weather we had over the winter in the last several months, the project has moved along really, really quickly, and we're expecting it to be open, quite honestly, here in the next month or two. The road into the construction went so fast that we haven't gotten the road into the nature school constructed, but they've been holding, hundreds of programs out there already in the last couple of years. So that's one thing that we're extremely excited about. And, certainly one of Sarah's legacies that she's going to leave behind is this real willingness to think about how we engage broader citizens. And that's something that I've become increasingly passionate about as well, as we see the shifts in our demographics and the increased disconnect that folks have from nature, is really finding those ways to connect people back to nature.
So we can kind of consider that one challenge going forward, connecting folks back to nature. What other challenges, as you assume this role, are you looking at and planning for going forward?
I think it's like so many things. There's conservation opportunities everywhere, and we've been in a process of really thinking strategically about how we prioritize those conservation actions. And we talked about, the occurrence of chronic waste and disease, certainly the emergence of diseases, whether that's CWD or white nose syndrome, that has affected our bat populations, and certainly other concerns, high path avian influenza, its emergence onto the North American landscape, but the continued rise of invasive species, around Columbia, you certainly see all the bush honeysuckle and all of the other things. And so there's any number of challenges, but a real priority for us is to identify those landscapes where the greatest conservation opportunity exists, and then find ways to work with partners, our NGO partners on the resource side of things, and also on the public engagement side of things, working with communities. We work very closely with the city of Columbia and finding ways to connect citizens back to nature, but also, recognizing that some of our urban and suburban landscapes can be very important places for wildlife conservation.
We're talking with Jason Sumners, who's the newly appointed director of the Department of Conservation here in Missouri. And I have a specific warm spot in my heart for the department because I have a biology degree. I almost went into either zoology or conservation. I've mentioned a couple of my friends who are some of my best buddies and my educators. And when I think about the Department of Conservation, I think about education. I know Jason, one of my very good friends, Michelle Baumer, who's going to be leaving the agency in retirement here real soon as public involvement coordinator, is just so passionate about public outreach, about getting people involved in nature. And I think it's so important these days, and I know especially with the youth slot, that 18 to 34 slot, in a story in the Jefferson City News Tribune, you were asked about that, and you commented about how there's just a lot of, I guess, disengagement by young people with the great things going on with nature, how they can get involved in so many ways throughout so many programs and with so many resources. Tell us about how you're going to try to engage young people and what kind of plans you have. I know Michelle has been so very involved in that, and tell us what's going to go on in that realm.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Michelle. She has a special place in my heart. Early on as a deer biologist and her public engagement work, I had the opportunity to work with Michelle a ton, and her ability to figure out ways to connect people, understand where they are, and how we can better engage with them certainly had a significant impact on me pretty early in my career. And one of the things I will say, early on when the Design for Conservation went through, one of the big capacity adds that the department, added in the late 1970s was a pretty strong education branch. And education within the department has been a long history and legacy because of that. Like we recognize as hunters and anglers the benefits of, I get a little stressed out, or, somebody else around the office get a little stressed out about things. We're like, I need to get outside and go for a walk. I need to go set in a tree if it's in the fall. I need to do something like that. And I think we all, just passionately recognize the value that nature provides to us from a physical and mental health standpoint. And so we've been tracking this through time, what we call a conservation monitor survey. And the concerning part is as generations get more urbanized, they become further and further detached from nature. And that 18 to 34-year-old demographic, when we do surveys and ask about, their support of conservation, their understanding of the Department of Conservation, it's not that they don't support us. It's just that it at a much higher rate than all the other age demographics, they just don't really even know who the department is, which is a little concerning, right? Because we do and have a lot of outreach and education sorts of opportunities. So it really is about finding how that generation of folks want to connect with nature, and how do we address some of the barriers that they have to nature. Because we also know the flip side of that. We also know it's a very eco-conscious generation that certainly cares deeply about the environment. They just don't necessarily have come up through some of the traditional ways of engaging with nature that so many of us have enjoyed. And so it's going to be really, specific sort of targeted programming that meets that demographic. And what that exactly is, we don't yet know. And we're going to start doing some experimenting in that space.
Well, Jason, I want to really compliment you on all the great work that you've done as you've matriculated into this new position and getting there, and all of the passion you have. And I know that's really going to be expressed as you move forward in leadership. Hopefully you'll join us again. We're out of time for this segment, but perhaps we can set up something regular to highlight what's going on with the department. Folks, if they want to stay in touch, it's mdc.mo.gov. I have all of the apps downloaded on my smartphone. And maybe you'll join us again, because I'd like to talk with you about invasive species. When we and I don't mean border control. I mean out in the nature. When the next time we chat, how's that sound?
Oh, I'd absolutely love to do it. Appreciate the time.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, and Godspeed on your new mission as the director of the Missouri Department of Conservation, not Conversation. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right, there he is, Jason Sumners. He's the real deal. What's hot with Hannah?
You know, the obsession with the Kelsey family since, our number 87, Travis, started dating Miss Swift, has been way out there.
Yeah.
And one of the least problematic Kelseys, arguably, would be Kylie Kelsey, who is married to Jason Kelsey, the Philly royal family. And she got into it this week. Stephanie, have you seen this?
I've seen the video.
Yeah, I won't play the video because it's just two girls yelling at each other and you can't really differentiate who's who. But Miss Kylie Kelsey got into it with a fan in the Jersey Shore last weekend.
Uh-oh.
And what happened was the fan came up and asked Kylie for a photo or an autograph. And Kylie very nicely said, you know what? It's date night. Jason was right there with her. I would rather not, but thank you. And the fan didn't like that. And the video that's circulating, they're like chest to chest almost yelling at each other. You can hear Kylie say, "You're embarrassing yourself. Save your breath." But a lot of people are saying that, Kylie's just iconic for this, which is maybe a little sexist because I feel like if a dude got into an altercation, it'd be different. But Miss Kylie Kelsey, the royal family of Philly.
Everyone is defending her. And also in this video, you see, she was a D1 athlete, right?
Oh,
She's
yeah.
like 5'11", and this gal who's barking at her is like 5'1", and is like clearly if she wanted to give this gal a shove or be intimidating, she could, but she was being very polite about it. And I think you can tell when even at the games when she's been in Kansas City, she stands in the background. You can tell that she's not somebody who's she's not a Brittany Mahomes. She's not trying to get in the limelight. And I think setting some boundaries for yourself, for your family, especially when you have small kids, is smart. And I think she's tried to do that in a respectful way. And I think people appreciate that about her and are respectful of her choices and her ability to defend herself.
A lot of
Jersey Shore. I wonder if Snooki was there to have her back.
A lot of folks are quick to point out, too, that Jason Kelsey is just kind of behind Kylie with his hands on his hips like, yep, she's got it. It's handled.
Now let's go back to earlier there. You were saying something would have been different if it would have been a dude saying no?
I feel like if two dudes were in each other's face yelling at each other,
what would have been
it
different?
wouldn't have been headlines. I don't know.
Like when Ashcroft and Denny Hoskins, when Hoskins got into Jay Ashcroft's
I don't think he was
face.
asking for an autograph.
No, I don't think so. I think it was a little different circumstance.
Touche.
That did go sort of viral. After all,
It did. We got to get into that too because we got news. Kehoe's got a bus. Ashcroft's got a complaint.
I know.
There's lots of governor news that we haven't talked
Kehoe
about yet.
surrogate, well, sort of, Jane Duker, who June 27th. That is, of course, the first debate between former president and to be either acquitted, convicted, or judged part of a hung jury. We don't know what, as the matter goes to the jury today after the orders are given by Judge Mershon. So it'll be, some adjective will be applied to Trump by the campaign. We know that, by the Biden campaign. But it'll be between Trump and Biden. And, of course, RFK is trying to nose his way into it. Doubt that happens. But we're going to have a debate watch party, the huge event. What'd you say? A huge event, right?
You got to do your best Trump impersonation.
It'll be a big event. It'll be the tallest screen. It'll be a great event.
It
right?
is going to be huge.
It'll be huge.
Y'all didn't quite break our website yesterday, but we thought you might for a minute. We are asking you to register because we do have limited spots. We want to know if you're coming. We've got candidates already signed up and some organizations that are going to join us. So we hope that it is a fun time had for all. I think the debate's going to start at 8 Central. So we're going to open the doors at 7. We're going to have a couple of cool contests. Hannah's hoarding all the prizes at her desk right now. But I know one we are planning on doing already is Best Political T-shirt. We might have to do, you guys were already texting us some of yours and you've got some pretty good ones.
Yeah, you guys got to save it because you're giving us ideas and we may or may not steal them.
Right. So we might have to do a first, second, and third, but we've got an
PG on the T-shirts too, folks.
That's
family friendly crowd.
Like PG-13.
We've got an original MAGA hat. I've got a cute little Trump bus that actually was gifted to me by our guest this morning, Michael Bekesha, directly from DC. So I'm going to part ways with it just for y'all. But anyway, so we're really excited. But we do want to know if you're coming. There's a Facebook event. So if you want to help us out, we'd love it if you get on there and share it. So we can get all the family members together in one place. Of course, Lakeside has popcorn. And we'll need it for watching this debate. They also have
that butter.
They also have adult beverages. They've got a great snack bar. It's going to be really fun.
I loved it. We went and watched the Ariel movie. What's it called? Under the Sea?
I don't know the name of it. I watched the Trolls movie.
It's called The Little
The
Mermaid.
Little Mermaid. I don't know. Ariel Under the Sea.
Is the new one the same?
Yes,
the same name?
It's just The Little Mermaid.
Sebastian's my favorite character. I love Sebastian.
Go figure. You're both crabby.
He's a crab. No, he's just fun-loving, and he sings the greatest song ever sung in that movie. It's beautiful. But we're going to get to a couple of things now. We're going to get to the initiative petition stuff and all that. But, Brian, I want to hear from you and your reporting on some of the news in the documents about this murder in Columbia. Another murder on Sunday afternoon.
Well, yeah,
or evening.
It would have been Sunday evening, and then it gets confusing, and there was gunfire on Rice Road in the middle of the day on Monday. But I've got updated stories. I linked to the court documents, 93.9theeagle.com and KWS.com. But in a nutshell, 3 adults, Randy, and 2 juveniles have been basically captured in this case, or 3 adults have been charged in connection. 2 juveniles have been detained would be the proper term. They are still looking for an adult in this case. The 2 suspects who are being jailed right now without bond are 18-year-old Jordan Brantley of Columbia, 34-year-old Juanita Lambert of Columbia. Second-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence. There's other felonies in the case. Many of our listeners, Gary asked me this. I've had a lot of people ask, what's the motive? What's the motive? And the answer is, folks, we don't know. You can look at it yourself. Take a look at it. 93.9theeagle.com, KWS.com. The court documents are heavily redacted. We know this. It was not a random incident. 5 people showed up at this house, 10 o'clock at night, 2 wearing ski masks and dark clothing. This is all captured, by the way, on video on this house on Boyd Lane that had very, very extensive surveillance footage. And the person who was killed, the 18-year-old teenager that was killed, Trayvon Ashcraft of Columbia, no indication he was shooting at all, but he happened to get into the crossfire. It just very, very sad and, just a horrible situation right now. And they are searching, by the way, the woman they're searching for is Shannon Glasgow of Columbia. They are searching for her for tampering with physical evidence. So if anyone knows her location, whereabouts, you're urged to call Crime Stoppers in Columbia, 573-875-TIPS.
Yeah. Again, these episodes erupt from time to time. We'd had a relatively quiescent winter for the most part. and then things picked up. There seems to be some temporal correlation with the weather getting better and the days getting longer.
It could be, although I'd make the argument we did have a couple of incidents over the winter, but I understand what you're saying.
What I mean? Remember last summer was terrible.
Oh, and then we had the White Castle situation, a gunfight right out in White Castle. And I'd make one more point here, Randy. I'm going to leave.
I like mine with extra pickles. I don't know if I'm ever going to go up there again. I'm scared.
It was
What does this do to the business climate? I keep raising this with people. I mean, it's a big deal.
It is a big deal. We hear about Clark lying every time we turn around, don't we, Brian?
Well, and I live in that area. I mean, it is. Residents are scared. There is no doubt. And keep in mind, there were people in town at the hotel behind the White Castle that were there for the Mizzou softball game. They were there, here they are in town, visitors, and seeing, this was not in some alley. This was in the middle of a parking lot, White Castle on Clark Lane. Now, the one on Rice Road, that's much more secluded, if you will. But you were asking about possible motives about the Rice Road. And this is in the court document, and we're going to read it verbatim. This proves to me it's not a random thing. This is what it says, quote, somebody can be heard on camera yelling, "He's right there, shoot him, shoot him." And Brantley can be seen shooting firearms to the south on Boyd Lane, end of quote. They go into a lot more detail. You can link to that. But, I mean, clearly they were there for someone from all indications, the person they were saying, "He's right there, shoot him," that person wasn't shot. This guy stepped into the line of fire based on the court document.
Literally in the crossfire.
He
right?
did. He did. I mean, and he may not have. There were other people in this house. So
these are young people. I mean, in a way, you have some sympathy for these people. That, my gosh, they shouldn't be involved in this stuff at their young age. Their lives in front of them, and they get involved in this downward spiral of criminality and the gang culture. It's just a terrible thing.
Yeah,
I don't know that this is a gang thing, but I mean, when we talk with police officials, we've talked with Matt Nichols, we've talked with Jill Schluty, there seems to be a lot of connection there, right?
There very well could be. I can't tell from the court documents if this is gang related, because if it is, it's either not in there or it's redacted. It's certainly possible. The police have not said that. I think at some point it would be good to have Lonnie Lockhart Bay on our program. I've talked to him about this show. I've talked to him on the done stories here on the station about him. He's got the youth center in town. He, flat out, I've reported he's a convicted murderer. He served time, former gang member. He is trying to get these young people to change their ways, basically stop doing it, not to do what he ended up doing, to go to prison. And they got ARPA money. They're trying. They are making a difference. They are. But as he told me, they've got it set up. It's right now down on the Ash Street. So basically it's not far from Douglas Park. But Mr. Lockhart Bay has told me, and he's got a partner with him as well that's also served prison time, they don't have one north. They don't have one east. The east area would be Clark Lane. So, there are people in the community that are trying to help. And the police are doing all they can in this situation, and they have done. They need a little help in finding this 33-year-old woman right now, and they've solved the White Castle murder. They've solved a lot of these cases. They solved the elderly lady and the other lady that were shot to death and found in a we're talking 37 officers short, by the way. They're in a tough situation, the police. Any help you can give them, they're going to appreciate. But they have solved a lot. They just, and there's still several subjects we don't know who they are because they were wearing ski masks who were there this night. Maybe they're not. I don't believe they're charged. I don't know who they are right now, but they potentially could be charged because they were at the scene of a homicide.
Yeah. These things are tough to sort out, and so that's why let's give the tips line again for anyone that knows anything.
573-875-TIPS is the number to call. If someone knows where Shannon Glasgow's whereabouts are, that's the number to call. They don't need your name. They don't need your phone number. They just need a location.
All right. Thank you, Brian Hauswirth. Appreciate it. Okay, Stephanie, we've got...
Brian, we might want you for this, too.
Okay. The governor has decided that there's going to be a couple of amendment initiatives on the ballot in August.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, but there's other amendment issues that I guess will now be in November, right? Maybe he could add some to August. When does that deadline? Does anyone know when that deadline for determining that occurs?
I don't have he's got a little more time. I want to say another couple of weeks at least.
It's coming up quickly, but essentially for the initiatives where they have to count, the secretary would have to engage in random sampling, which would have to basically be going on now to get something on the August ballot. If he's doing the full counting, then they will go on November. So yes, yesterday the governor announced, hey, I'm going to put some stuff on August. One of those was what the legislature passed last year. It was a joint resolution as far as child care tax credits. Let's try to get that right.
Okay.
And then also the KC police funding, which the court just ruled that it had a bad fiscal note summary and it needed to be revoted. I think in the court's opinion, it actually said it needs to go on the November ballot. Some people are saying, well, the court said November. The governor is saying August. The Missouri Constitution says that the governor can either put it on the next general election or at a special election called by the governor. And so he's placing those two on August. Presumably the rest of them will end up on November. Again, they're counting signatures, so although they've turned those in, it's not a done deal that all of the ones that turned in signatures will appear on the ballot. And then I think Randy, you were asking, I think about is it the Senator Ben Brown one on citizenship voting?
Yes.
Presumably that will go on November as well.
November
And the ranked choice voting. That
ranked choice
was
is a
that the
big
same deal, or were they separate resolutions?
I think that one's in the same one.
But either one, I mean, so you'll have an opportunity to vote on saying no to ranked choice voting, and only citizens can vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of all citizens.
And former Representative Chris Kelly has told me, a former judge, that's already in the Constitution, or actually, but again, there are some that say I think it's Becky Arps who said there's a gray area there. But Stephanie, your point on the Kansas City police proposal is very interesting, because the voters overwhelmingly in this state said they wanted additional funding, essentially, for the Kansas City Police Department. Quentin Lucas his complaint was that people in Sikeston, he hasn't said Sikeston, people in rural Missouri shouldn't be voting on Kansas City police funding, but they're set up in such a way with that police board that is why they are voting. But you're talking about that thing was overturned on a technicality, the bad fiscal note. It had support. I expect it's going to pass again. But nonetheless, again, those are interesting.
And historically, if we're talking recent times, the governor often, picks, we did Medicaid expansion in August, in what was that, 2022?
2020.
2020. Was gay marriage
drink that you don't squeeze, unfreeze, or refrigerate. Didn't wow the public until astronaut John Glenn put Tang on the map because the water on the Mercury space capsule was so bad he had to put Tang in it. They said today the astronauts are still drinking Tang and the Russian cosmonauts mix it with their vodka on the ISS. When Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin first met on the moon, what did they have for lunch? Ham salad sandwiches. And said the NASA scientist said they worked well because the mayonnaise not only binds the loose ingredients together, but also creates a savory flavor. Eating shrimp cocktail in space sounds like something like gas station sushi, but the shrimp cocktail, a big hit. In 1995, astronaut Bill Gregory said he ate 48 straight meals. Each one included an order of shrimp cocktail.
Oh.
Crumbs a huge no-no in space. Anything that might crumble off in the pieces and float around, not real good for air vents or getting into the eyes and nose of the crew members. So NASA now providing liquid salt and pepper. And to cap it all off, if you're out in space, you're not exactly privy to all the resources here on Earth. So the astronauts working around the water shortage problem are now running their urine through a filter system for reuse as drinking water. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, astronauts drink their pee. So have a glass of steak and a piece of coffee for your morning meal, and that's the rest of that kind of stomach churning story.
Oh, man. You know, Tang was like that wasn't their big calling card was the drink of the astronauts.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I remember as a kid, they made a big deal about that.
Yeah, my favorite space story, which blew my mind, and I just listened to kind of a piece on this, is that the astronauts, especially the ones, they were particularly talking about the ones that went to the moon, that they had a little, basically like a little Walkman, and the Walkman was designed so that they could record their thoughts, like their notes, because with the gloves, they couldn't take notes.
Oh, yeah.
And so because they were able to bring like little tapes to record their thoughts, they also brought their own mixtapes.
Yep.
And put music and we're like listening to tunes, and sometimes they'd be listening it to so loud that other people would have to tell them to turn it down. And so I just think about all these astronauts up there in space like jamming out, and I'm thinking like, what would be on my mixtape that I took out into outer space with me?
That's some of the best parts of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie is when they're playing the oldies, you know, and
right?
Chris Pratt's listening.
Elton John and David Bowie and all that stuff.
I think it'd be so fun.
All right, sounds
Number
good.
one menu item that they love the most at the International Space Station, what passes for bread? Tortillas.
and when they're on the ballot, August or November, and how's that decided? So thanks for calling in and helping us sort that out. Welcome into Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Happy to. Doesn't everybody listen to you on Wake Up Mid-Missouri?
Well, I don't know. My mom does. I know that. She, my mom and wife, so we have at least a couple. So that's good.
Yeah. Under the Constitution, everything appears on the ballot in November unless the governor calls for them to be at an earlier election date. And we saw the governor yesterday, and he was very kind to work with us because yesterday was the day that we certified the ballot for the August election. He moved Amendment 4, the one that dealt with how much the city of Kansas City has to spend on their police, and another one that was passed by the legislature last year dealing with taxing of locations that provide child care. He ordered those to be moved to the August ballot. So those will be on the August ballot, and we really appreciate him letting us know that in a timely fashion. So those will be on the ballot for the people to vote on in August.
Okay, so let me test my student of civics skills here. There's two ways that amendments to the Constitution can get on the ballot. One is by a citizen-initiated petition. The other is with through the legislative process. I'm especially curious about the legislative issues regarding ranked choice voting, only citizen voting, right? And then I think there's a third one in there that I can't think of right now. But okay, that was passed by the legislature. Those are automatically going on November, right?
They automatically go on the November ballot, but the governor has the authority to move them. But he did not move that one.
Does he still have time to do that?
If he said to do it, we'd find a way to make it happen. But yesterday was the day we were supposed to certify the August ballot, and he knew that and had worked with us. So I don't think he will. But if he gave us the order, we'd find a way to make it happen.
Okay, how is the signature validation process going on for the abortion petition and anything else that you're having to verify adequate signatures?
Signatures have been sent out to 116 local election authorities across the state. They are moving through those signatures and verifying those signatures. Each county kind of allocates time to do it themselves. Some of them hire temporary workers, and obviously some counties like Jackson County tends to be a hotbed. St. Louis County, they tend to have a lot of signatures to check. Some other counties have very few. So we have had, I think, a couple of counties get done with some of the IPs, but there were 4 of them that they had to be checking. All of those signatures will have to be checked and the results sent back to our office in July, so that we can do the final certification and either give a certificate of sufficiency or a certificate of insufficiency if they didn't get enough signatures.
All righty. So working through that process, and then, it seems like there were a ton of excess signatures over the threshold required. I recall, some 300 and some odd signatures. And what's the threshold, 180K?
For a constitutional, you really need about 171,000 minimum. Mm-hmm. What we find is historically 35 to 50% of signatures are thrown out. They're not registered voters. They're not in that county. Maybe they signed twice, so only one of their signatures counts, something like that. So that's why we go through the process, and that's why people want to make sure they turn in so many, because they know they will lose a lot.
Okay. Now, look, there's another bit of news I saw breaking on Twitter yesterday. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch is reporting that someone's got a Jane Duker who lobbies for police organizations. Not the organization that has endorsed you, but other police organizations in St. Louis, has said that she's claiming that the Committee for Liberty PAC, which is your PAC, somehow did some mailing contributions, and she's got a problem with you and your fundraising and mailing. Tell us about what's going on.
Well, she's got a problem with any conservatives. She only supports Democrats or moderate Republicans. Yeah, she was unhappy that my campaign and this PAC were jointly fundraising. But under Missouri law, that's explicitly allowed. They were sending out joint fundraising letters, raising money both for the campaign and for the PAC, which is like, this is the silly season of politics. You just make something up, accuse someone of something, and hope it sticks. That's all this is. It's just one more Democrat coming out for tax hike Mike.
Well, what's interesting is the Post-Dispatch reported that Duker is a representative of, or I guess works for, various police organizations that have endorsed your opponent, Lieutenant Governor Kehoe, but you've had endorsements from other police organizations that she doesn't work for. I mean, there were some interesting insinuations in the Post-Dispatch article. Your comments?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's the way politics is. People project what they've done onto their opponent instead of talking about their own record, instead of talking about how they can move Missouri forward. I mean, look at my website for my campaign and my opponent's websites. Their websites are just boilerplate. I'm actually rolling out detailed plans to how to get rid of the state income tax. How do we actually get 1,000 more officers on the street? How do we get truth in sentencing? How do we make sure we have the changes to legislation so that we can get special prosecutors appointed and get rid of prosecutors that won't prosecute crimes? How do we put parents in charge of their children's education? When you don't have anything good to say about yourself, you lie about your opponent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to comment on this because, I mean, again, this seems to me sort of like a Dean Plocker thing, right? I mean, you make complaints, just people are, nitpicking fights over a couple $1,000 here and there. And what, I don't know. It just, it seems to me, I, like probably many of the audience and the listeners, get tired of this nitpicking instead of talking about real issues that affect real people in mid-Missouri every day. And wanted to give you a chance to, to respond. So, hey, thanks for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jay.
Day.
Okay, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, we thank him for calling in because he's in the news and, of course, in both professionally and in the campaign mode. And we want to get his response. That's the way we approach it on this show when people are, have a beef or have a beef against them. Well, we'd like to hear what they have to say. We try to get all sides on as well. So we will do that from time to time.
Something that also matters with respect to ethics complaints that's been pointed out was they don't have a quorum.
Yes.
And they were supposed to, the governor had made some appointments, but because of the turmoil in the Senate, those appointments didn't get confirmed. And so although they thought they were going to have enough people, I think currently they're sitting with not enough people.
They can't meet.
They can't meet, take any actions, anything like that. Now, I believe the governor can make an interim appointments and then they can start serving and that can get ramped up. But obviously in election season, you can file a complaint, but apparently they can still conduct investigations, but they can't take any final actions if they don't have a quorum. So
it's an interesting race for governor. And I for one, as much as I am fond of Governor Parson, and I really think his leadership through COVID and the pandemic, I personally was on many calls with other hospital administrators, docs, officials, state officials trying to work there. He did some great leadership during that and does a lot of great work. I would like to see our governor in Missouri show as much collaboration with and leadership of, I should say that, in a policy matter of the legislature as perhaps they have in Iowa. I don't know if it's a different setup there, but I keep going back to this education issue and the fact that Governor Kim Reynolds up there really led the charge and, really led the charge for vouchers and just really the dollar follows the scholar.
Well,
that fundamental thing. And I'm hoping our next governor puts out a couple of policy things. And now, Governor Parson did do that in terms of workforce and his agenda. I guess maybe I'm looking for some stronger education agenda leadership next governor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Governor Parson has been an exceptional leader, and I think, but I think with respect to like him pushing on the legislature, I really appreciate some separation of powers, and I really appreciate people kind of staying in their own lanes. And I think having your governor bear down on your legislature creates more conflict rather than less. Now we're going to see a little bit because he's going to have the opportunity to line item some of that budget coming up, and he, if you recall, he line item quite a few things last year. We've got a smaller budget this year, but I'm still interested to see how that plays out. Of course, I'm hoping we can chat with him too because he's been on this trade mission overseas, talking to companies that are either already doing business in Missouri or want to do business in Missouri. I think that's really important work. So excited to see that too. But, there's some interesting things going on with these statewide races. We've got this, I think that's really the first complaint I've heard filed in the statewide context. Yeah. We've got David Wassinger, who we need to have on this program, has not appeared on this program yet, is an attorney out of St. Louis, previously ran statewide for auditor, lost in the primary to Sandra McDowell. Is independently wealthy, I think. He gave himself $1.5 million yesterday in his race, and that puts him up ready to compete with the fundraising likes of Lincoln Huff, who is in that race. You've also got Holly Rader, who's in the race, who's well known but has less money. And a lot of people are saying $1.5 million changes that race.
Well, look at the dollars in the governor's race. With it's pretty lopsided. With Mike Keogh at last check was like what, $6 million and a couple million or $2.5 million or so for Jay and another $1 million for Eigel and all. So But yet, Jay's a lot of times that doesn't matter, but boy, it buys access.
But yet, Jay is leading in the polls. It's really an inverse relationship so far in the polling versus the money.
It's still a really fluid environment, and the other person that's kind of making waves is our treasurer Vivek Malik, who apparently is already spending some of his money, is up with some ads. I actually got a mailer at my home yesterday. They said, I think the report is that's his second mailer. He's got a ton of cash and is already getting out there. And I was checking yesterday, we've got 1 month and 23 days before early voting begins. And again, we've got the 2-week no excuse absentee. So, when you're thinking about, I'm just thinking, are you, and I asked my family members a couple weeks ago, do you even know who are in these races? And they were very confused. And that's people who, should know. But are you paying attention yet? And I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to wait till after 4th of July. I'm going to wait till the fall. We don't have time for that. You've got to get educated now, and start making some decisions, because it's going to come up really quickly.
And I would agree with Jay. I hope that the candidates focus on the policy positions. I hope they articulate those clearly, and as detailed as they can. As they try to engage voters, and hopefully they will be out in force, or their delegates. I would like to see as many candidates as we can at the debate watch party beforehand, so that you can press the flesh and get to know them on June 27th, which you can learn more about through the website 93.9 The Eagle, KWS, or of course on our apps too. Okay, John. I want to ask you before.
Well, yesterday, mixed bag in the markets. We've got the S&P basically at even, NASDAQ up about 0.6%, Dow down about 0.55%. So really mixed results. We've got everybody in the red this morning quite significantly. So it's not looking like it's going to be a good market open. Yesterday, driving those losers was industrials and health. Driving the gainers was energy and technology. John started it, and I'm going to stick with it. He liked to talk about space food. I'm going to talk about the Space Force. And I just love the idea of a Space Force. I think it's great. And the Wall Street Journal was reporting on it earlier this week, saying America is getting ready for space warfare. And the news here is that we are energized in our efforts to defend ourselves in space. We're also talking more publicly about, we're not talking publicly about what we're doing, but we're talking more publicly about what we know other countries are doing. We are also engaging startups and private companies who are developing new technology that we then could potentially use in space to help ourselves. So currently defense companies are trying to develop satellites that can chase other satellites. They're developing ground stations that can maybe send signals up to space. And the military is really looking at commercial startups that are doing some of these new technologies. So I think that's really exciting. I think it's an area that we really need to be protected in. Apparently, Space Force's recent budget request, which was almost $30 billion with the B dollars, of that, about 25% was going toward what they called, now we're talking about, we've been talking a lot about new terms, and I like these terms that they used. That 25% of their budget would go to space superiority. I think that's really important. And then responsible counter space. And so they were talking about some actions in particular of Russia. Apparently, Russia has been accused by us of deploying a satellite that likely has some attacking capabilities. There's also, so China launched some sort of satellite that they described as having the ability to clean up space debris. But when we were analyzing what it actually could do, apparently it was able to move around a different Chinese satellite. So that is deemed a threat by the U.S. if they can launch these satellites that essentially can move other satellites. And so we really are kind of on this new frontier of trying to figure this out and so prepare ourselves.
So what I don't understand is, though, there's two things going on, right? I mean, there's satellite versus satellite, but then there's also rockets versus satellite, right? On a separate type of an initiative. Mm-hmm. And the Space Force is really something that, I mean, that was a Donald Trump initiative, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to be the ones defending against all of this kind of tomfoolery going on. Sounds like the Chinese have some more strategic ambition than we do. Maybe ours is just cloaked.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about threats and we think about things like the Jones Act and other things, and we think about like our waterways and our land and all of that, like, oh, is China buying up, a pork plant in Missouri, or am I worried about them like doing something in space? I think I'm more worried about what they're doing in space.
What if they take out a Starlink? reservation site for the debate watch on June 27th. So I think that is filling up, and there are limited spots.
Yep, we need you to register on the website. You can check out our Facebook page for a link if you are a candidate or an organization and you want like a booth spot to kind of set up your table or your wares or whatever you're wanting to do to meet with folks. You need to email Hannah, let her know that you're coming so we can keep a spot for you. But we're super excited. Randy, you and I both have been to Lakeside here recently. Cool. You saw Little Mermaid. Yeah. I saw Trolls. They've got. I think they're doing Batman this weekend. And so just a great venue, a fun time. They're going to have their snack bar open. They've got beverages. It's going to be. We're going to cross our fingers. The weather's going to be beautiful. But this is the only place in America. I'm going to just say it. I know in all of Missouri that you're going to be able to watch the debate on a huge screen outside. Like it's so
really
cool.
Neat. And I tell you, the grounds were so well kept. The grass was beautiful to lay on. The little grandkids were running around because they got bored with the movie. I was more interested in the movie after about half of it, but that's good. You know, they have a short attention span. They were running around, and I just felt as though the whole situation was great beforehand. The beautiful playground there, and it was fun. And I had a little bit of popcorn.
Yeah, if you haven't, just a little bit of that butter popcorn. If you haven't been there before, though, that's a good point. They've got really nice, well manicured lawns, and the sound is really good. If you wanted to sit in your car, you probably could. But a lot of people, you just bring a blanket and your bag chairs, and you can kind of like set up a little area for you and your friends. So if I know we have some people who are very people-y and like to be around a big crowd, but if you kind of want to watch with just a smaller set of people, there's plenty of room to kind of spread out, do your own thing.
Really neat.
I like the idea because they're not going to let Trump have a crowd, and I'm mad about it a little bit. So we're gonna set up a big old crowd, and if you want to boo or cheer or do whatever, feel free.
Right, it'll be fun. All right,
cool.
We were talking earlier about what interaction is appropriate between the governor and the General Assembly, and Stephanie, you said you.
I know he caught so much flack about a year ago with his 200 or so line items that he vetoed with a lot of pork projects in St. Louis County and St. Charles County, and Nick Shore and all those guys got pretty alarmed by it. I think back to Mel Carnahan, who, the lawmakers and everybody else kind of called him the education governor, and the Hancock Amendment was all in that era. But he got into it. I remember over at the State House when there were some late-term abortion ban bills that came down the pike, and he vetoed those. Heck, you could go right into the Jay Nixon era, and the guy that I think it was the Associated Press, Brian, called the cutter in chief, and he got into it with Tom Schweik, the auditor, over redistricting and spending and all of that. The Supreme Court had to throw that out. So it's been rocky for governors, I guess. In a word, how about Eric Greitens? He had his issues with his House investigation over the alleged improprieties and all.
John gave a very good summary there, and he's absolutely right. I think the one thing I'd piggyback on him, and then I have some thoughts, is the partial birth abortion ban that John referenced was in 1999. A Democrat legislature, folks, I'm going to say it again, a Democrat-controlled legislature overturned and overrode a Democratic governor on the partial birth abortion bill. Young people probably are turning. They can't believe it.
No,
the legislature was Democratic. Most of them were pro-life. 1999, not 1900, 1999. So that was there. The three examples I'd give would be this. Carnahan and Bond, very similar, different parties, but Governor Carnahan and Kit Bond essentially set up shop in the legislature, and they got most of what they wanted. I mean, Carnahan lost on the abortion bill, but he knew those Democrats and even Republicans were allies on many bills. He probably got 85% of what he wanted. Kit Bond faced Democratic supermajorities, and he wanted the Highway Patrol drug and crime control, and he got that. And he worked with Bob Griffin. He set up shop, and he was in the General Assembly quite a bit in the chamber. And I would argue that it worked for both of them to do that. Greitens, forget the impeachment. The example I'd give, the first thing he did, and people forget it, the first thing he did is he said, these are all career politicians. They're all career politicians. That's essentially what Governor Greitens said. And that set the tone poorly, and there was a just bad reaction to it. And he did not have a lot of goodwill when he started that. And by the way, we're in a term-limited environment now. There's really no career politicians now.
Well, remember that initially, Brian, where Greitens right up from the get-go. I mean, the day of the inauguration was like, hey, I'm going to cut all these state boards and cut all these people off of them.
Yeah, and he, and then he got into an argument with Denny Hoskins about, the term, whether they were career politicians or not.
Over pay raises and all that stuff.
Yeah, and the problem is he had the bully pulpit and stuff, but when he needed them, when he was about to be impeached or could have been impeached, he had burned some bridges there. And I will say this: Governor Greitens always treated me very fairly and always talked to me.
And let's be fair.
He gave me interviews.
Let's be fair to Governor. I should be fair to Governor Parson in terms of he had his hands tied and very busy for a couple of years, 2-3 years, really with the pandemic, right? I mean, couldn't been as pressured with other items because he was sidetracked with that.
Well, and because Governor Greitens was sidetracked with a lot of various things, there was a lot that had been left on the table. Like when we're talking about appointments, backlog, and there was backlogs of so many various things that Parson spent the first year digging out of so many things that were just left by the wayside by the Greitens administration.
Education. Remember that whole deal?
Yeah, I mean,
the commissioner's seat over there.
We're talking about folks not having a quorum. Some of our really important boards and commissions didn't have a quorum, and those appointments were an absolute mess. And it's not like you can just say, okay, Randy Tobler is going to be on this. A lot of it, there's applications. It requires background checks. There's referencing. I mean, there's a process by which people get appointed to these things, and then there's confirmation. Right. Anyway, but I think, one positive thing I would say, I'm surprised I'm even saying this about the Greitens administration. I think in certain ways they had good ideas. And so when we talk about staying in your lane, one thing that I think is in the lane of the governor is cleaning up the administrative state. That's something the agencies are underneath the governor. He has a lot of authority there. And so when they did talk about, and I don't agree really with how he was going to clean up boards and commissions, I do think there are some reforms there that you can make it easier for people, regular folks to serve. Mm-hmm. But I do think, I think he had a plan to go through and strip out the red tape. Now, the execution of that was very poorly done, and he essentially went through and changed a bunch of words, which really didn't do a whole lot. But when we talk about reducing the burdens on businesses, especially through the administrative code, administrative regulations, I think that would be one way where I would expect a Republican governor to really come in. And that's hard work. It's not, flashy. It is digging down into the details and really talking to the folks who are affected by those burdensome regulations. And I think that's one way the governor can really help and stay in his or her lane.
Yeah. And I think this actually for the past several years since the Conservative Caucus and now the Freedom Caucus came up, I can understand why a Governor Parson, Governor anyone would probably want to stay above the fray and not really get involved in that. Yeah. So it was a unique circumstance that he had a legislature that was just not really in sync and was so dysfunctional in many ways. I think it would be tough to show the kind of leadership that maybe in other issues he maybe would have wanted to.
Well, I would add this. I mean, the media in Jefferson City, quite frankly, missed the story. I mean, we had a Republican supermajority cut out $2 billion with a B out of the Republican governor's budget. Had they cut out $2 billion out of a Democrat governor's budget, you would have been all over the front page. I mean,
but don't we?
But that's a big deal.
Good point.
Well, but we're also learning, and I think I said I didn't think they were going to go to a special session. I think I've since been corrected that we'll have to go to a special session, and basically we're going to bring back a lot of that cuts through a supplemental, and I think that is the overwhelming consensus now.
And I think it would, but I mean the point is the speaker was under investigation. There were other things going on. The Conservative Caucus was having, their battles with the leadership. So there were a lot of things going on, but I still think cutting $2 billion out of it. I'd give one more example here, guys, and that's John Ashcroft. John Ashcroft was a Republican governor, 2-term governor. He had Democrats supermajorities in both of those chambers the entire 8 years, and not one of his vetoes was overridden. And that is because he worked, John knows this, even though they disagreed on a lot of issues, abortion was one of them. He worked with the speaker, whose name was Bob Griffin. And if people don't know who Bob Griffin was, he was the Speaker of the House that later ended up going to federal prison. But I will tell you that I would argue he was more powerful as the Speaker than any of those governors he served with. He had that much power. John, you know this. If you were a state representative and you crossed the Speaker, Bob Griffin, you were basically sent to the basement, basically, with no office. He had a lot of power, but John Ashcroft had a way to work with him, and he got what he really wanted, which was education and also highway funding. So, again, Ashcroft was not set up in the legislature like Bond and Carnahan were, but the bottom line, he knew how to work, and the two men respected each other. They really did. It was a different era, though. It was a different era. It's hard.
Been a while since we had a fist fight in the outer office of the Missouri House Speaker like we did in that era between some members of the Missouri Black Caucus.
Well, and that was, we had one about 10 years ago, and it was over right to work. Two members of the Black Caucus got into a fist fight over at Bones. One supported right to work, one didn't. And they were both Democrats. They got into a fist fight.
I just find
allegedly.
I find it interesting that there seems to be a penchant for. There appears to be a penchant among Missouri voters and among United States voters to want to see some disruptive, assertive leadership in the executive branches. You look at the Donald Trump thing, you look at the Ronald Reagan revolution, you look at, Eric Greitens. Because I think they're telling us something. They're telling the political class something, and that's like, the status quo isn't really working out for us. I mean, we talked with Aaron Hedlund about how there's out-migration of economic activity and business and population in Missouri. So I'm always one that looks at this from sort of a business standpoint, which is disruptive innovation. That beautiful thing, as Clay Christensen, God rest his soul, named it, is a wonderful thing because it really tosses out stuff that's not working, and it brings in, maybe some rough around the edges, but some needed revolutionary change. And it seems like every time, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Eric Greitens, try to do something that's disruptive because what we're doing ain't working out so well, they get slapped down. It's just an interesting push and pull in that direction.
Well, and I don't know that I would characterize it as disruptive. I don't think voters are voting for disruption for the sake of disruption. I think if we look at those three candidates, we look at Eric Greitens, we look at Ronald Reagan, we look at Donald Trump, the things they all have in common is they didn't grow up in politics. They weren't a lifetime politician. They were folks who had experience in the private sector, had other experiences, signed the front and the back of paychecks, know business, know the real world. And I think when people are looking at who they want, if you get a choice between the person who wanted to be, and Eric Greitens is a little bit of an exception because he wanted to be a politician the whole time. He did spend some time in the private sector, though. But, if you get a choice between someone who...
An outsider.
Only ever wanted to be in politics, or someone who went out, worked hard, worked their way up, found some frustrations with the government, and wanted to serve their community, I think people are going to pick that second choice every time. And
Kansas City Chiefs are headed on Friday?
I don't know.
Taylor Swift concert.
Close, but no cigar. Nope, they're headed to see Joe Biden at the White House and get their obligatory slap on the back. And there was some speculation that Taylor and Travis might be there hand in hand, but she's playing in Madrid as part of the European Swing of the Eras tour. So he's going to have to go stag instead of drag to the White House.
Oh boy! How about you, Hannah?
What? Sorry. I was looking at the playlist over here, and I noticed a problem.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Well, let's go to Stephanie. What do you got on your leftover list?
One of the bills we haven't talked about much that actually passed this session. Apparently, Missouri is set to create a cyber stalking task force. And I think especially as we talk about youth, it's getting ever more prevalent. We got to worry about our kids all the time. But that bill is awaiting the governor's signature. And I think it's smart for Missourians to be looking into that and to be worried about cyber stalking. So
now, earlier, cyber. You talked about the Space Force and about everything. Warfare is going to be cyber, right? Whether it's on a personal level, whether it's out in outer orbit, right? I mean, so that's an important thing. I'm glad we're getting ahead of the technology. I hope that they start thinking about AI things too. I mean,
and Congress actually, I had said that a couple weeks ago, especially when we heard about ScarJo's ChatGPT, or is it ChatGPT stealing Scarlett Johansson's voice. I said this is going to ramp up.
That is Johansson with a J.
Scarlett Johansson.
Yes, yeah. I said this is going to ramp up Congress's action on AI, and it has kind of stirred the pot. And they said they are expecting to propose some sort of bipartisan bill to regulate AI, perhaps as early as next month.
They need to modernize, some of those regs. That's the tough thing. We talked about Robert De Niro being a surrogate for the Biden campaign yesterday outside the courtroom in there, or the trial courtroom in New York City. This was a cute little, I don't know, it was AI generated, but this was someone came up with the real De Niro statement I found on Twitter. I thought this was fun.
First of all, everyone, please put on your masks and keep your distance. Some of us are really weak and fragile, and I don't know why they made this podium so high. I told them I'm coming straight from the bathhouse and didn't